What's going on, guys? It's Patrick here, and welcome back to Top 10 Trends. Now today, guys, we're going to be taking a look at 10 Rick and Morty theories to get you ready for Season 3. After several recommendations from friends, I finally decided to sit down and watch the show Rick and Morty. And, well, 2 days later, I was done it. Rick and Morty is an animated sitcom which follows the adventures of Rick Sanchez, a mad scientist, and his fretful, easily influenced grandson Morty, who split their time between domestic family life and interdimensional adventures. In other words, it's fucking awesome. And with Season 3 right around the corner, I thought that this would be the perfect time to go over the 10 best fan theories which may prove relevant for the upcoming show. Also, let's go for 5,001 likes to rub it in Matt's face. Anyways, guys, let's get into it. Number 10. Rick was once married to Miss Frizzle from the show Magic School Bus. Now, at first, this sounded to me like the biggest long shot ever. I mean, like Miss Frizzle, that is just so random. But I'm gonna be honest, there's definitely some points which add up to this. First point of evidence, Miss Frizzle was a ginger. And guess who in the family is also a ginger? Summer. Now, this is a recessive gene, so maybe it didn't show up with Beth, and then once Beth had a kid, it could have been expressed through Summer. As more speculative ideas go, I mean, if you just think about it, Rick is like a mad scientist, but has all these crazy adventures and stuff, and Miss Frizzle is more on the safe side. But if you really think about it, she does the exact same thing. She goes inside of people's bodies, she explores the universe, all these different kinds of things, except the difference between them is Rick hates education. So doesn't that make sense that maybe he doesn't like education because of just the bad taste that was left in his mouth from his past marriage? This theory is definitely a long shot, but of all the evidence, there is really nothing to suggest that this theory isn't true. Theory number 9. Rick knows he's in a cartoon and that he is actually just simply a cartoon character. Now, this is a theory that is at least true on some level, because if you think about it, in the episode where they're watching TV, Rick gets this satellite that can take up TV from every single universe. And while flicking through those TV channels, he's probably eventually come across a version of himself that is a TV show of the life that he is living. So I think it's safe to assume that Rick knows he's in a TV show in his own universe of universes. But to go even further, Rick makes suggestions to the camera. He says,
Wubba-lubba-dub-dubs! Yeah, that's my new thing. I'm kind of like, what's his name? Arsenio. That's what Arsenio used to say on his show. Wubba-gubba-lubba-ups! Right? See you next week, everybody.
I don't get it.
Hey, see you guys next week. He says wubba-lubba-dub-dub. All these kinds of things. And there's even a shot in his room where it shows that he has made the connection to the creator of the show. I think that Rick knows he is in a cartoon, and that is why he is so depressed. Number 8, the meta theory. So this is the idea that because of the infinite universe possibility in the show, Rick clearly explains that there are an infinite possibilities in their universes. This provides evidence that perhaps every theory that anyone has ever come up with for Rick and Morty is actually true in another universe somewheres. But what if you were to take that idea even further? So there are multiple scientists that have suggested the theory that perhaps we too live in a multiverse, a universe of infinite universes. And if that were true, the events that take place in Rick and Morty would have actually taken place at some point in time somewheres. Whoa, man. Number 7. Remember way back in the pilot episode where Rick and Morty travel to another planet and they get the mega seeds that Morty has to shove up his butt, and then they try to go through customs. Spoilers ahead, but there's actually a theory which suggests that that initial encounter with the Intergalactic Federation ultimately led to Rick going to prison in the final episode of Season 2. So what do we know? Well, before the final episode of Season 2, the Earth wasn't in the Intergalactic Federation. So for Rick, it was probably a pretty good place to hide from them. Well, if you think about it, that was really probably the first situation that made the Intergalactic Federation realize, oh hey, Rick, he's that guy that's done all these terrible things. We need to start following him, and that was their initial lead. Now Tammy, that's the girl that is the agent of the Intergalactic Federation who ultimately busts the entire wedding at Bird Person's home and all that stuff. she is initially shown in the Meeseeks episode where he gives the huge speech as to why Summer is such a great person. And doesn't it seem suspicious that when they're going through customs, they're so quick to pull Rick and Morty out of line? What I think happened is they spotted Rick at the interdimensional customs, and they were going to kidnap him, stop him, question him, whatever, and he managed to escape. But that did start the lead. They then hired Tammy the agent to follow him, and ultimately that led to her hooking up with Bird Person and ultimately getting them all in one place at the same time where she could bust them. So if Morty had remembered to turn his gravity shoes on, maybe this all never would have happened. Number 6. Now, speaking of the Megaseeds, there was a huge discussion which considered the fact that perhaps what is in Rick's flask is actually Megaseed extract, and that's what makes him smart. When it's inside of Morty's butt, it actually seeps out and makes him a genius for a very short time, and some people thought, well, maybe that's why Rick is so smart. Now, this was later disproved by the creator of the show on a Reddit post, but it is something that I thought was pretty interesting. Honestly, though, I am glad that this was disproved because that would mean that Rick isn't even smart, and then the whole point of the show would just be a little bit more lame. Number 5. Now, if you guys want to see the full explanations to any of these theories, feel free to just go down into the description. They're all going to be there. And this theory actually comes from the YouTubers Film Theorists. So this is the theory of Rick's crime. And basically, in a nutshell, what it breaks down to is that Rick is a destroyer of worlds. I mean, he went to jail for something, but we don't actually know what that something was. And in this video, it's like a 12-minute video, it goes super in depth. Basically, they explain how, if you think about it, Rick is so nonchalant about just destroying the world. In the Cronenberg episode, Rick Potion number 9, I mean, he completely messes up the world, and it's just no big deal. Oh yeah, we'll just go into another universe, no big deal. Whereas Morty is left traumatized. There's that scene where he's just not saying anything, and Rick's just like, oh, grab a beer, we're all good to go. And, this kind of suggests that, well, Rick probably has done this before. I mean, Bird Person even says that, their fight with the Intergalactic Federation, it has been bloody and, crazy and all this stuff. So the idea that Rick really is just like this destroyer of worlds and just, completely powerful is a pretty solid theory. Number 4. We haven't been following the same Rick and Morty in every episode, and furthermore, we're not following the same ones at all. So I don't really like this idea because I think that it kind of throws off the idea of, C-137 Rick being our Rick. But there is a lot to suggest that this is true. If you just think about it, really, I mean, there's an infinite number of Ricks, and it would be pretty easy for the show to just take place. Every single different episode is just another Rick. Now, there are some episodes where he does say, I'm C-137, but that's not every single episode. And although I don't like this theory, it is something that really, for the show, could be an actual truth. Number 3, and this is where we're about to get really deep on these theories. Mr. Poopy Butthole is actually a parasite. In the episode Total Recall, a parasite that invades the mind and creates positive memories of a person that didn't actually exist invades the house. And what starts with one character known as Steve ends up turning into 100 characters in the house, and the team has to figure out who is real and who is a parasite. The show creators make it seem like Mr. Poopy Butthole is in fact a parasite, only to have Beth shoot him and it turns out that he's actually real. Or is he? Rick clearly states that killing all parasites will stop more from showing up. So when he kills Steve, shouldn't that be the last parasite and the only parasite? Well, right after this, Mr. Poopy Butthole shows up and we then have the intro cutscene. So with Steve dead and more parasites showing up, the only logical explanation here is that either Mr. Poopy Butthole is a parasite or one of our main cast is a parasite. Now, if you think about it, throughout the entire episode, Mr. Poopy Butthole is there, and then at the massacre, when they just start slaughtering all the parasites, he's nowheres to be found. Then we would have to explain how Beth shot him, and my answer to that is simple. Mr. Poopy Butthole created that memory, and that it's not actually real. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. Patrick, parasites can only plant positive memories. Well, if you think about this memory, it's not actually bad. Now, a negative memory would be something that Mr. Poopy Butthole did bad to the other characters. Mr. Poopy Butthole being shot is not a bad memory because he forgives Beth. So if this is true, that means Mr. Poopy Butthole is in fact a parasite and he is now out in the open to do whatever he wants. Number 2, the ticket. So in the episode where Rick and Morty drop Jerry off at the daycare, Rick C-137, our Rick, is given the ticket number 5126. We then follow Rick and Morty throughout the whole episode. We have Crumbobulous Michael killed, we have this crazy gas guy, and at the very end of the episode, that Rick and Morty come back into the daycare and are then approached by another set of Rick and Morty who ask, hey,
wait, do you have 5126? I'm not sure. Morty. That's a Blips and Chits ticket. What? Way to go, Morty.
The exact ticket that our C-137 Rick is given. So that means that during that entire episode, that is not our normal C-137 Rick or our universe. Now, if you want, you can just take that for face value and say, okay, yeah, so in this one episode, we don't follow our normal Rick and Morty. But if you really want to go in and deduce some things from this fact, we can look at it. So number one thing is Crumbobulous Michael was never killed. This assassin guy, he is still alive. And there's a theory that points this out and says, well, this guy's really good at sneaking into bases. Maybe Crumbobulous Michael is going to rescue Rick from jail, and that sounds like a pretty good theory to me. What's even crazier though about this episode is that the other Rick and Morty that we follow, they get these rocks. And these exact same rocks are seen in the episode where Mr. Poopy Butthole first appears. Now, unless our Rick and Morty of the C-137 Rick, if they went off and did the exact same thing that the other characters did, that would mean that everything is normal. Regardless of what you want to believe though, the fact that that ticket was set up the way it is was done on purpose, and there was definitely a bigger reason behind it that I'm guessing we'll figure out in the next season. And finally, our number one theory. This is the master theory, and it actually comes from a Reddit post, which will be down in the description. I strongly recommend you read it, because when you do, you'll have your mind blown by this entire show, but I will do my best to paraphrase for it. The Morty that we have followed throughout the entire series is not C-137 Morty, but in fact, Eye Patch Morty is Rick's original Morty. So Rick has stated multiple times that he is the C-137 Rick, but it is never actually stated or confirmed by him that our Morty is the C-137. We also have a scene where Rick is holding up baby Morty, but Morty's 14 years old and Rick left Beth 20 years ago, so that doesn't add up. What if there was a Morty that Rick left behind, that Rick abandoned for death, and perhaps this Morty actually ended up surviving? Maybe he was a smarter Morty that managed to make it out, and that is Eye Patch Morty. So this would make a lot of sense that this Eye Patch Morty, who was actually controlling the Rick that was killing all the other Ricks and had the big huge dome, that Eye Patch Morty was controlling that Rick. So maybe this Eye Patch Morty has a grudge against our C-137 Rick, and he went through all the trouble to do all of this, to frame him, perhaps to get our C-137 Rick's memories. Who knows? But anyways, guys, that is going to be the video for today. This was a crazy video to make. I hope that you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Feel free to leave a like, and that's it, guys. So all theories down in the description below. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you later. Peace out.